Life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisting. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
Welcome back, Racially Speaking family, to where we have real and honest conversations about race as it's viewed through the lenses of faith, family, and vocation. As always, I'm David Phipps, and of course, joined by my guy, John Mark Walker. JM, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. It's good to be on with you again. How you doing?
I'm good. So I like this. So usually, for our listeners, we usually record at night. So I like this morning thing we're doing right now.
I know it's a little bit different. The sun is shining.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful 70 degrees in Virginia today.
Is it 70 down there right now?
It's gonna be. Yeah, I mean, you're in the mountains, right? So it might be colder. It's probably still fall for you.
It's a little more chilly.
You haven't even entered winter yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping my voice holds up because, like I said, it's morning. So I don't have my water. I've got my coffee. I couldn't not. I had to choose one because I don't want to have to stop to go to the bathroom right in the middle of this. So you're gonna have to steer the ship if my voice goes out.
Okay.
So listeners, if it turns into just John Mark, yeah, if it just turns into a monologue of John Mark, that's why. So you've been warned.
I'll just start preaching.
Yeah. What's something new you've been getting into lately?
Something new lately. You know me. It's always like video games. So recently, I've been playing the classic Ocarina of Time on my Switch because I was suckered and I updated my Nintendo Online account, so now I can play N64 games on my Switch. So I've been going back to 1999.
Is that a thing? I didn't know you could. I mean, I have a 64. I didn't know you could do that though.
Yeah, you have to update the Nintendo Online account to get you pay a little bit more, but I went in with my siblings. You know what? I'll just get you on ours. We have eight
Perfect
logins. So
yeah,
we'll exchange. You can be a part of my family, and you can have access to N64 too. So
love it.
Yeah,
love it.
Yep.
For me, I haven't necessarily gotten into anything new, but I recently went back to playing a little bit of pickup basketball early in the mornings.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been good.
How are your knees holding up?
Yeah, exactly. My knees
back,
so I hope you didn't just jinx me. But my knees feel okay. I've got notoriously, anyone that knows me, terrible ankles. Like I've sprained my ankles upwards of 8 to 10 times throughout my life. And yeah, they're bad. But anyway, I hadn't played pickup in the gym since really COVID. So I just went back. And I won't lie, man, it was not good. Not that I was rusty, because that was a given, but the wear and tear it took on my legs by about halfway in. We played for like an hour. I was essentially walking. So that was a little bit
You just
depressing.
passed the ball all the way across the court.
Right, I'm getting, I don't want to enter into that, older age, and don't think I'm old, but if I'm an NBA fan, and by that stretch I am getting older. I'm past my peak, and so I don't want to have to keep facing that, but I think I've got to. Not recovering quite as well.
Okay, how old is LeBron? How old is LeBron?
He is, I should know this. 37, I think.
Okay, all right. Mm-hmm. So you still got some years.
Well, I can't compare myself to the GOAT.
That's true. He's the greatest of all time, but he's also about to be the oldest of all time. So
true. And he kind of just announced he wants to play till he's 40, essentially, with his son. So
there you go.
Yeah. But I'm feeling more of how the rest of the team on the Lakers is, and that's old and can't do much besides catch and shoot.
That's fair.
Oh man. Anyway, this is about week 3. I only play a couple times a week, so getting my legs back.
Good for you.
Getting my legs back. And hopefully I'm rounding the corner of my second peak. Probably not. Yeah. But we'll see.
You gotta do some ankle strengthening exercises.
That's been the X factor. That's what I've been doing. I've been properly rehabbing while I watch TV at night and sit on the couch with my bands and in the living room. So that's been the X factor. I'm hoping it
Good for you.
Gives me some more, a few more years.
Yeah, we're at that age where we got to stretch and stuff. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stretching's the worst.
We got to spend at least 20 minutes warming up.
Yep.
It is the worst.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of stuff that's not new, we just talked about maybe new stuff we're getting into. There's still a lot going on, and I don't know if you knew this, John Mark, but racism still exists. Yes.
No, I thought that was in the past.
Much to talk about. We have a lot that we're going to get into here. A couple of topics that I really, that might be, those of you that follow closely to the news, might be a little dated, like a couple weeks old. And one in particular, the first one, I didn't even plan that it'd be something we really needed to address. And I don't necessarily think it's something that we need to, but it's come up enough times in conversations that I've had, and just it's a big enough deal, I think, in the space we're in to address a little bit. So, Joe Rogan. Rogan. How much do you know about Joe Rogan?
Yeah, so I don't know much about Joe Rogan. I remember he was, his career a little bit. So I know a little bit about his career. He was on The Man Show, which was something that was in like early 2000s.
Okay. See, I didn't even know.
It was not a show that I'm pretty sure he was one of the hosts, but it was one of those shows like late night when your parents don't know that you're watching TV that you shouldn't be watching. It wasn't like super crude, but it definitely was not age appropriate to be on TV. Yeah. So anyway, it was kind of a comedy thing. And then he was a comedian after that. And then he got into UFC. And like, I wouldn't want to square off with him. He's a fit dude and he knows what he's doing. Yeah. And he was announcing that. And then Fear Factor, I think, is really where he hit it big. So I know a little bit about his career, and then he got his podcast and that took off. Right. And so,
yes,
I haven't listened to an episode. I see clips online, but I haven't listened to an episode. I know he has a big following, and I know that Spotify signed an exclusive deal with him. And so he's like their podcast now. So he's not on Apple. He's not on other platforms.
Yes.
Spotify exclusive.
Yeah,
so that's what I know about his background.
Yeah, that's roughly what I know. So I want to make sure we don't put out misinformation, which is right on cue with Joe Rogan. But so he's on. Yeah. I don't know much about The Man Show, but you're saying you thought he was on there. There's no need to know much. No. We don't need to unpack that. I meant, I don't want to say he was on something because he was on. That was Jimmy Kimmel.
That was Jimmy Kimmel.
That
was Jimmy Kimmel. That was not Joe Rogan.
Okay, I was like, I don't want to put that out there if that wasn't right. And
no, he was on it. No, he was on it.
Okay,
but I don't know when or how, but he was somehow connected with that.
I think it was Jimmy Kimmel and Adam Carolla. Was he a third guy on there?
It was. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know.
Don't worry about it. I just want to put that out there. I don't know for sure. I just knew that Jimmy Kimmel was, and I was like, we're not saying the wrong person, are we? Anyway, and then I'm wondering if you. Again, I don't know this either. I'm not a UFC person, but he does look very similar to Dana White, who is the commissioner of UFC.
Okay. So anyway, this I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So he was one of the later hosts of the Man Show, and then.
Great. I don't doubt it.
I know he's So he also was. I think he was an announcer for UFC.
Great. So, okay. That I'm not a UFC person either.
Part of his career.
Just want to make sure. See, we're being consistent.
Not all white guys like to say it, but I can't get them confused sometimes.
We do a due diligence here on racial speaking. Want to make sure we're not just glancing over if we misspeak. All right. So that's a gist of his career. I'm not gonna lie. The first thing I knew and the main thing I knew about him is Fear Factor. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he was the longtime host of Fear Factor, that crazy show, which was extremely entertaining. But the latter thing that you mentioned,
I just remember spiders. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
Spiders
That show. I would not last. I I couldn't do any of that, like whatsoever.
Not a
Maybe I
chance.
could
Yeah,
handle
no,
some
not
of the
even the
eating.
No.
I don't do
Not a
heights,
chance.
and
Not
I
a
don't
chance.
do snakes and spiders, and I mean
Yeah.
that I'd be
It's not worth it.
not that I would ever get on the show or try to, but it would be a waste of time.
Right.
Yep, waste of time.
Yeah.
And right now, as I mentioned, I'm not in the greatest physical shape, so that's all three things right there. Because they always have to do that obstacle course at the end. Anyway, getting off track.
Right.
The last thing you mentioned, Joe Rogan. The Joe Rogan Experience is his podcast, and it's been out for, I think, upwards of 10 years, actually. So he was even ahead of the game with podcasting, it sounds like. And as you alluded to, you mentioned he has a huge following, and I did some light research. What I came across is he has an astronomical following. Like, it's not like he's a pretty big podcast. It's like he might be one of the most listened to voices in America.
Yeah. Yes.
He's at the top of the charts of most listened to podcasts, but apparently it's not even not even kind of close. It's not like neck and neck. It's like he is like triple what you can think. So there's that. I think there's a case that he might be one of the most listened to voices in the world, in the country. But like you, I have not personally listened to an entire episode, so I don't have a lot to say about the content for the most part. We'll get to that in a second of what he talks about on there. But when all this kind of controversial stuff came out, I started to remember a handful of times, probably more than a handful of times, and with how often Joe Rogan's podcast is brought up to me when I'm having conversations like we have on here. And it's often recommended to me as like a good, rock the boat, objective, like conversational podcast. And I haven't thought much of it other than, I'm not going to try to be like a revisionist or hindsight person, but when it's recommended, I'm a little struck because of what I do know about Joe Rogan. I'm like, man, isn't he pretty like in your face and really, really blunt and dry? And yeah, I mean, I remember like to rock the boat and very, I'm trying to think of a good adjective, but demonstrative. So it just kind of struck me as like, maybe I'll get around to listening to an episode and wonder what it's about. Fast forward to now, and I'll kind of bypass the controversial stuff with, I think the original controversy was he had spread misinformation allegedly about COVID, and then people on Spotify started dropping out.
Right.
I think Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, and some other artists dropped out on Spotify. But then, more recently, which is where we're at now, is a video surfaced, a montage of, I think, 10 to 12 years of his podcast of him spouting off racial slurs, specifically the N-word. Yeah. And I don't know if you listened to that or not. I listened to it, and
I didn't see the video.
It's 12 years worth of him just over and over and over and over and over. It's clips. Let's be fair. It's clips. Nothing's in context yet.
Nothing in context.
Of him freely spouting off the N-word on his podcast. Regularly. All kinds of different contexts, different tones. And I'll add with a hard R on the end of it.
That's true.
And so I don't recommend, especially if it's triggering for everyone to go find the video or listen to it. It was I don't know if helpful is the right word, but impactful, I think, to hear of how egregious it was, in my opinion. Wanted to hear your thoughts on this as we kind of dive in here, John Mark, because this family show, we're not going to play something like that on here right at this point, but it's out there for listeners if that would be helpful. Lots to unpack, but your first thoughts. You said you listened to that video of kind of
I did.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I did, and so I don't want to come off too light on him, but I also don't want to come off too hard. Like, I want to be fair with how he comes across in the videos, how he uses those videos. He did apologize for his use of that word in those videos. And honestly, I think we need to have space to allow people to grow and to be confronted. And so So I did see his apology. I didn't pay much attention to it, but it was nice that he issued an apology. But in the context of those videos, I saw the same clips, so I don't know full context. But it didn't seem like he was intentionally using it to harm others, right, or to oppress or abuse, to be mean. He was quoting people who used it in a mean way. But the thing that upsets or bothers me is how comfortable he was saying that word, just so freely flowing, saying that word in all of those instances. Like not a pause, not like he didn't qualify it with anything, no quotations around it. And I think that's true to his character and true to his radio personality, is that he just will say whatever. But in this particular word, I think with our racist history, this word I think is just so volatile that you have to treat it like no other word. Yeah,
absolutely. So again, like the main video that came out was a series of clips, and you mentioned the apology. Did you watch the apology or listen to it?
I can't remember. I didn't listen too closely to the apology.
Right.
From what I gather, from what I remember of the apology, I think it was as good as I could expect a Joe Rogan apology to be.
Okay.
So
see, that's more charitable than I would have thought you would have been. And
really?
For me, I mean, which think what you think. I thought it was a terrible apology, and I don't say that because I think he should be just reflexively canceled. I'm not saying that. And I completely agree.
Right.
I think there needs to be space for people to grow, for there to be apologies, and there's a time and place for people to be heard out when something like this comes out. I didn't like the apology because it was, to me, pushed all the buttons and was very classic skirting around what he actually needed to apologize for. And one of the main things was in the apology, he mentioned something very specific to defend himself, and to me, it made it worse. He mentioned, so I listened to one part. I listened to someone else breaking it down. So it was these people breaking down what the context of one of his uses of the N-word in that video. And it was in response to his apology, because in the apology he said, of course, the classic, I'm not racist. I said these things, but I'm not racist. And when I said this, and this, it wasn't racist. And so they said, okay, and that the clips were from 12 years. They were taken out of context, all that kind of stuff. So he wasn't actually owning anything. I'll get to the part where I think he did own something, and I thought that was good at the very, very end of it. But on this, it was when he talked about going to see, I don't know if you knew this, the movie The Planet of the Apes in theater.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to bring that up.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to hear your thoughts. But he described going to see the movie Planet of the Apes, I guess one of the newest ones, and he off the cuff says, and man, when I went to see that, I don't know how this happened, but he said he accidentally ended up in this theater. He's like, I went to see Planet of the Apes, but instead I ended up in Planet of the Apes, man. Like, that movie wasn't filmed in Africa. It was filmed in this theater, and he's specifically referring to black people. He ended up in a theater in a neighborhood where mostly black people live. So it says he's living in Planet of the Apes, living the Planet of the Apes. And so he refers to that in his apology and said that he said that, and he said, but it really wasn't racist. But as he's saying that in the original clip, he literally says,
he called it racist.
I shouldn't have said that. That was really racist. And then moved on. So I get at times, we're doing this right now, getting tripped over your words. But if you're apologizing, that is a perfect opportunity. The writing's on the wall. Everyone can hear it or listen to it at this point. And just opportunity, if you're apologizing, apologize. That's not a time to say I'm not racist, or even though I called myself racist, that actually wasn't racist. Which we'll continue to unpack what that even means when someone says they're not racist nowadays or are being called racist, because that's becoming...
That needs to be unpacked.
That's becoming muddier and muddier.
It is.
But do you have any more thoughts on the apology and Joe Rogan?
Yeah. I mean, I saw those two things separate, right? The montage of him using the N word.
Yeah.
I would say is very unwise, and it would be nicer if he's quoting somebody instead of saying the word they said. If quote N word, people understand what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for Joe, I would say use a little more wisdom, be a little more discerning about the words that you use. For the video, the Planet of the Apes video, and those comments, he himself in the video called himself. He confessed that he was racist in saying that.
Yeah.
And for a little bit of history, wherever Black people were brought away from Africa forcibly, or where they came voluntarily, if you can find that in history, wherever that happened, people labeled them apes. Called them monkeys, right? That's a racial slur, right? That's a racist action. And so he was just dancing in line with this history, right?
Yeah.
When he was talking about I arrived in Planet of the Apes. He had that connection in his mind.
Even the language of arrival.
Intentionally he wanted to do that. Right. So he had that connection in his mind. He was in a blacker area. He was surrounded by Black people. He was not used to it, and so his thought process is look at all these monkeys. Right. He didn't say that, but that's what was going on in his mind, and so that's why he made that connection. So I think he needs to examine where that came from, and with his apology, if he wasn't able to just fully confess that for the racism that was within him that came out in that moment, then I think he still got that in him that he's got to work through and bring that out to a point where he can't say, yeah, that was racist. I'm sorry. I'm seeking to grow from there. Right. That would be a good apology. Right. So those are my thoughts. That I think is worse than the N-word montage video. So,
as I mentioned in the apology at the very end, I feel like I'm hoping he caught himself and realized, wow, this has been a really terrible apology. That's how it came off to me. And then in the end, I feel like he was on the cusp of understanding that. And he said, with all that said, anytime you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you really screwed up. He used different language, but and so to me that was the best. That was the most honest part, or the most apologetic, remorseful part, because I was like, that you should have just said that. Like, you don't have to have all the answers, but that meant
you don't.
I would think more. That meant more to me as a listener, and I would assume means more to Black people and people who are most offended by this than all the other stuff he said. Like, to me, he just put his foot in his mouth more and more as he unpacked defending that montage of videos. Because there was another one.
Yeah.
There's another thing. I just can't imagine he's around, at least on the podcast, a lot of Black people, to be honest. And I'm not going to speak for all Black people, but I just can't imagine that he is around, because to freely say it like that has just, I mean, there's just so much to unpack that is with the giant audience he has. I just can't believe he is in a place to feel that comfortable and free to spout that off at this point.
Yeah.
Everyone is learning, but to me, that's something that I'm like, I just don't have, I don't know how you have patience for that kind of ignorance, if that makes sense. So it's either super egregiously racist or it's ignorant, and I can't, I mean, he's in entertainment. I don't know how he's in a place where he wouldn't have known the implications for what he was saying. And there was, and speaking of like being around Black people, there was one other thing, and I think was unpacked from that montage, where he, I guess I don't know if it's not a co-host, but it's somebody that he works with, or maybe was a guest, and he asked like, what are you, or something like that, and he was mixed race, I think half Black, half white, and he said, oh, so you've got best of both worlds, you've got the brains of a white person and the body of a Black person.
See, that's racism right there, right? That's the influence of racism. That is thinking better of your own ethnicity over and against another one. So for him to say, I'm not racist, it's like, yeah, Joe, 90% of the time, you're probably not. 99% of the time, I'll give you that.
Oh, that's too
but
high.
There are moments where, yeah, probably too high. But there are moments when it comes out, right? And he can't help it. And I think in those moments, if we are humble, if we're willing to learn and truly want to grow, then we can acknowledge, oh yeah, that was bad, right? Because compared to anything else that we do that's wrong or harmful, hurtful, we lie. Just because I've lied in my life doesn't mean I'm a liar. Like that is my identity. That right? So just because you hold a racist view or you act in a racist way with bigotry or prejudice, just because you do those things doesn't mean that is who you are. But we are all part of the culture that we come from. So it's going to come out, right? It's going to come out in some way. So it takes humility to address that, right?
For sure.
Yeah. I can't believe, it's shocking that he said that, but I'm also not surprised. I can totally believe that he would say that to somebody, but it's shocking and absolutely racist that he said that to that person.
Yeah. Right. And some of the, I think, defense overall, like we mentioned at the beginning for his podcast, it sounds like, again, I haven't listened to a whole episode myself, but it sounds like a lot of his defense is he likes to rock the boat, likes to say stuff that gets reaction. And I do think that's how he's built his audience, reactionary, I guess clickbait, the equivalent to clickbait type thing. And I hear that a decent amount by people that don't want to dive into these topics. And to me, it's too much of a way to usurp and devalue or invalidate how the marginalized feel. So like to say that when your defense is, I just like to rock the boat. My reaction nowadays is find a different way. Find a different way, because it's easy to rock the boat.
That's good.
You can say stuff that anyone can say stuff that rocks the boat. It's not helpful if it's hurting others.
And people who are foolish can't help but say stuff that rocks the boat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you think you're smart and you're rocking the boat, are you sure you're smart or are you just stupid?
Yeah. Hey, yeah. Absolutely. This segues into something else along the lines of how should we be defining racism and justice nowadays, and what does that mean? But first, let's take a quick break. This podcast was created to elevate BIPOC voices and our allies, and to invite everyone else to listen in, learn, and grow with us. If you have benefited from listening to any of our conversations and haven't already, please make sure to hit subscribe in whatever app you're listening on right now. Now, back to the conversation. All right, I said I wanted to segue into something else, but real quick to tie up this end on the Joe Rogan stuff. John Mark, do you think Joe Rogan should be canceled? Because that's a lot of people's debate right now.
Yeah. That gets to the word canceled. I think the word canceled should be canceled. A bigger debate about canceled. Yeah. No, I don't think he's going to be. I don't think Spotify is going to give up the money that Joe Rogan show brings in. It's all about the money, right? I don't think his audience is going to stop listening to him. I never have recommended his show. I've never listened to his show. I probably will not recommend his show. So I'm not canceling him, but I'm not going to change how I live because of what he did. So, I don't know. Yeah. If you are a fan of Joe Rogan, I would say use your wisdom and discernment. Figure out what is a line that he can't cross before losing your listenership. Figure out what voices you're listening to, and is it helping you become more wise in the world and wise in the way of God and of love and of caring for others, or is it not doing those things and hurting how you live and hurting how you care for others? So those are some principles I would use if you're thinking about should you personally unfollow and unsubscribe to Joe Rogan.
Right.
What do you think? What are your thoughts on
Similar
should we
to
cancel?
you, like I said, I haven't listened to a lot of Joe Rogan podcasts or anything, and so I don't feel like I'm in a position to cancel him personally because it wouldn't change anything really about how I live. I think of just the word accountability. Like I'd want him to be held accountable for the pain he is causing by how he communicates, I guess, on there.
Yeah.
I would also agree with you with like in the context of how we use cancel with cancel culture. I wish we would cancel that because I think it's lost its power
There's no
entirely. Because when people are canceled, it's just typically not for the right reasons, and then the fact that they're canceled gets focused on more than the why that even was up for debate to begin with. So I would say that. As far as like, I know this gets into muddier waters with like freedom of speech and like I don't know if he should be, if Spotify should take him off. Personally, I'd want something like that to happen probably, but as far as conversations on every side of the aisle to be able to be had, I almost think like he shouldn't be maybe. And then, last episode we talked about teaching hard history. I wouldn't recommend anyone listening to Joe Rogan because of just what we've been talking about for like edifying information and growing, but to understand hard things that have happened and not remaining ignorant to, somebody super influential still holds these beliefs and gets away day to day with not just on the podcast, but he obviously says that in his free time as well, off the podcast. And so I'd want people to be aware of that type thing. So I wouldn't necessarily discourage somebody from, hey, if you want to, expose yourself, it's like reading an article, expose yourself to, a really hard reality right now. Sure. Go ahead and check out some of the stuff so you can form your own opinions, which I always want to encourage anyone listening to us or something on these topics to do your own, put your thinking caps on and do your own research as well. Right.
I like that. That what you just said made me think, and what you said earlier, I wonder how many Black friends he has, like actual friends. Like what is his community like in terms of ethnic diversity and in terms of having Black people speaking truth into his life, right? Or does he really care? Because he's got a lot of interviews. I mean, I think he had Kevin Hart on one of his shows. But like, so I'm curious about that. What is I know he's connected to the comedian world, the comedian scene. So I wonder how many actual Black friends does he have? Because it's important. He might not use the word as freely, as loosely as he does if he had more. And then his listenership. How much of his listenership is Black? Right. How much of his listenership are Black women? Because I think that is a little bit. He's a man, being a man. Like how many boundaries, how many lines does he cross? So those are some questions I have too about him. So, and then the last thing, he had like 10 years of the show. How has he addressed racism? I mean, he's covered so many topics. What episodes has he talked about racism in society? I'm curious how he would address that. So, I might go look it up, but
that was part of even the apology.
I haven't looked that up.
Yeah, that was part of the apology as well. That montage of him using the N-word was over 12 years. And so that was a lot of people were coming to his defense saying, oh, well, speaking of cancel culture, like that was over 12 years. Plus they were taken out of context. Which I get, which is important to think about. And then Joe Rogan himself, I think, said the most recent one was from 3 years ago. And so I just, what's the time stamp on where he's at in his journey with racism and not using the N-word? 3 years ago to me is not super long ago, but also it's just
that's not long ago at all.
And it's another thing. It's like, look, just cut the beginning of this apology out and just own that you have a lot of work to do and just let's sit in it a little bit. Like the end, really was, I think, the best thing he said but with all that said, whenever you're in this kind of position to have to say, I'm not racist, I messed up. And that's where I think is that part was the easiest part to hear, because I'm like, that's where you need to start. That's where his coworkers and Spotify need to start with where they move forward from here. In my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot to get to. So let's move on to this, and it kind of segues a little bit. With how are we nowadays defining these basic words, like racism and justice. So we've been talking a lot about specifically, who is Joe Rogan racist, who is racist, and then the often tendency to say, I'm not racist, when, something comes out of us that is actually probably racist, or connected to a racist history. But just recently, these past couple of weeks, two things, bigger stories that aren't the only stories out there, but two more well-known stories. Officer Kim Potter, this is in Minneapolis, was just sentenced to 2 years in prison after being found guilty for, I think it was involuntary manslaughter, for fatally shooting Dante Wright in a altercation. And this is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And she claims originally to have accidentally grabbed the wrong weapon, meant to grab a taser, had yelled, "Taser, taser, taser," pulled her gun instead and shot this young man dead. She got 2 years. And then the McMichaels and Roddie Bryan in the Ahmaud, and I'm not supposed to say the Ahmaud Arbery case, but the trial where those three men, the McMichaels and Roddie Bryan, were found guilty, sentenced to life at this point, for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery 2 years ago now, or was it 3? I think it was 2.
2.
2, yeah. I think the case just turned 2 years old. Anyway, those are two very, very different, I think, results, and we are not legal experts or anything. I wanted to focus just on justice from almost a layman's standpoint of what this would look like. So justice is thrown around often of we want justice, or justice was served, or justice was not served. What do you think about not just these specific two rulings, but how we use the words like justice as we're navigating these topics right now? What do you think about that?
Yeah. I like that you said we're not legal experts. We're not lawyers. I've been to a courthouse before, but that was for a traffic ticket. That doesn't make me a judge. So it's just, two guys' opinions. Mm-hmm. But we have thought deeply on these things and read pretty broadly. So our opinions are a little more informed than your average guy. But so your question, your question is, what do I say it again? Tell me your question again.
What do you think about how we talk about justice? Okay, so for example, should we refer to a life prison sentence for the McMichaels and Roddie Bryan for murdering Ahmaud Arbery justice? And or is 2 years for Kim Potter, Officer Potter, justice for
too short.
Dante Wright?
Yeah.
You said too short. Okay, so should she? What would have been just?
Too short? Should it be longer? No, I think that's a great question. I think that's a question we have to ask every time this happens. Every time it's happened in the past, every time it will happen in the future. I mean, there's so many things out there. I also think about George Zimmerman, who didn't get any time for killing Trayvon Martin 10 years ago, right? So I think about that, which in my mind connects to these guys that were policing, quote unquote, their neighborhood, and they went after Ahmaud Arbery, right? So I think we need to have a broader understanding and a broader conversation about policing and how it has been used against Black people in America, Black and brown people in America.
Yeah.
So not specific police departments and like police, like government official police authority, but just this idea of policing in general, right? Like the protect and serve is what we like to say, but who are you protecting? Who are you serving? Who are you protecting it from? What is the history of that? And so I think we need to look in all that. So that's broader, but more narrow. Justice in these cases, I don't think we can get adequate justice ever. I don't think we are capable of getting adequate justice. Justice would be if those men were still alive, right? Justice would be if Breonna Taylor was still alive, if we could bring them back to life, right? Yeah. And then pay fines and then do time and then on top of all that. But we can't. That is beyond us. That's something. God is the one who can give life. We're not the ones who can give life. So in terms of human justice, those three men, I think that's the best that we can do is to get them in jail for life. And I think has the verdict come out? Did you just say, did the verdict come out for their because one is a local trial and one is a national,
I believe
the
they
government.
were sentenced to life regardless, and then I think they appealed to serve it somewhere else where they want to be in prison. I don't know if it was a federal prison or something. This is where my knowledge is limited.
Okay.
But from what I hear is the Georgia government wanted and prosecutors wanted the time to be served where it happened in Georgia. So I think in some way they're asking for some leniency, and I don't think they were granted it. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through with their appeals, but I do think it's official. They did get life in prison.
Yeah, I think that's the best justice that we can get. It's hard for me to think of ways that we can do more from a government standpoint. So
I think I would tend to agree.
It doesn't satisfy, right? It doesn't satisfy our hunger and thirst for righteousness and justice. And I think that is appropriate because this world is broken and we can't fix it. We need somebody beyond us, some power beyond us. And that's why we need God. And as Christians, that's why I say we need Christ. Right. And then in Kim Potter's situation, I haven't looked at the details of that either, but there's a lot there, right? Like 2 years is very light. She says she didn't mean to use her gun. She said taser, which is training. So she got part of training right, but the other part was she reached for the wrong thing, and it wasn't her taser. And I think she was shocked at it. And this is where I think intent matters. Like those guys spent time and hunted down Ahmaud Arbery. Like they chased him, they pursued him. She, I don't think, intended to use her gun. And didn't intend to kill Travis McMichael. So I do think that makes a difference in sentencing.
Dante, right? Yeah.
I think justice, that's that.
Yeah.
Was
it
Dante,
good.
right?
Yeah, you're good. You just got them
I got it wrong.
Crossed.
I got the name wrong. Yeah. Okay. So, 2 years, I think it is right. She also paid $1,000 fine. I think justice now comes from, it's Minneapolis, right?
Yeah.
Am I in the wrong place?
No, that's correct.
The city. Yeah, Dante, right. Yeah. So that's the same place that George Floyd was killed. So it's the same police department as far as my understanding goes. Philando Castile too?
Yeah, Minnesota.
Same spot?
I think it was Minneapolis.
So they got some work to do. You know, that they need to make restitution to the families of those that were murdered. And I'm talking like, y'all don't need to work for another day in your life type money, right? And then they need to figure out what is going on in their police department that all these people, Black people, are being killed, right? And they really need to fix that up. Now, there's all these I understand this, but there are people who say abolish the police. And that to me is extreme, but I get it, especially in the wake of George Floyd. And we can have a conversation about that later and it would be good on this show. So I'm not saying that, but I really got to do some deep reform. I don't think anybody anybody anywhere in America is like, yeah, it's a good idea to not have police, like legitimately not have like somebody to come to my rescue when I'm being attacked. But they really have some work to do to fix their department.
I'm sure there are some.
I'm sure there are people,
but
I'm sure there are people out there.
More often,
I'm sure there are people out there. Right, it's a little crazy.
More often, it's attached to defunding the police, and even that, makes people quench up and be offended. But really, what's behind that is let's reallocate and prioritize training and how the police force functions, because it's not working in a sense of it's not working for Black and brown people. Black and brown people are ending up dead at a much, much, much higher rate than white people, and many of which are unarmed. So it's not working. And I mean, as you mentioned, just understanding the narrative, like I think many of us don't realize, I didn't know this until, relatively recently in my journey of understanding, but police were literally created originally to corral slaves. So even that, you can't detach that from where we're at right now. Is it the exact same? No.
No, you can't.
But it shouldn't be offensive that that's just a reality, and that there are still some residual effects. That even sounds put too lightly. But it should be, like, knowing that should be, I think, life-changing in the sense of, human beings are being harmed because of this system that was created to harm them. Let's talk about how we can help undo that. And again, we're not asking for perfection, because that's impossible, but we are asking for more empathy and consistency. And I think that's where conversations just have to move forward instead of being halted. And like you, my original question was like, what do you think about justice? I'm right on in lockstep with you I'm not saying we should not say it anymore, but to understand the context of where we're saying it, like, I think it fundamentally is impossible. Like, there's no justice. Like, there's the best we can do, but there is no justice. Like, people are, these guys are dead, right? They're dead. Yeah. The only way for it to be justice for that not to have happened, we can't raise the dead, right? Only God does that. So we can't do that. So what word I think comes to mind is accountability, and it's individual. Like, I want individual offenders to be held accountable, but it's a system, and I know that's even a buzzword sometimes, but it's a system. Like, statistics should lead us to unpacking these kind of things. They shouldn't just be a talking point. They should lead us to see problems and see why things are happening. And it shouldn't be like, most of the time statistics aren't super personal, right? They should evoke emotion, but a lot of times they're just facts. And it's like, what are we going to do with those? And I don't know. Lately I've been thinking about this. Like, I get hung up in not knowing what to do, because by nature, especially as a Christian, we care very much about the heart of somebody, right? Like, nothing matters unless your heart is in the right place, which there's absolute truth to that. I think sometimes that mentality can be used and turned around in a way to sidestep accountability, though, and compassion. And I think that's where we should camp out a little bit. And so what I mean is, in individual instances like this, so like a Kim Potter accidentally shoots Dante Wright dead. You mentioned this. I actually personally think there's a good chance it was an accident. Mm-hmm. And she's got a life. I don't think her, like you mentioned in the beginning, there needs to be room. I don't think her life is worthless now, and she should be, canceled or forgotten about and given no second chances. But she's in a position of power, and that history and the system favors and has given her a privilege to be viewed a certain way and given the benefit of the doubt. Does that make sense? So like, I think it's just, and she's been afforded the privilege of being looked at as an individual. And Dante Wright's family is even quoted, like his father saying that it seems like everyone forgot that my son was killed and cared far more about the emotion and comfort of Officer Potter. And he's not the only one that feels that way in that case or other cases.
That doesn't surprise me.
And so...
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
That's completely reasonable. And I think that there just needs to be conversations had with, okay, what are we prioritizing and when are we taking an individual view of this at the expense of the originally harmed, and in this case, killed? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if there was a change collectively of hearts, that we wouldn't be in the situation so often of, well, what was the intent? So you see what I mean? Like, I think focusing immediately on, what was the intent is immediately dismissive of, well, I don't know, but just saying that you accidentally grabbed the wrong gun and someone's dead isn't enough. Like, let's camp out there. Let's focus on what actually happened here. And then, and go from there, aside from starting with, she didn't mean to, right? There's been defenses for other people, like they are having bad days.
Bad days. Yeah, it's worse for the guys on the other end, right? It's a worse day. For Dante Wright. You know what I mean?
So I think there needs to be an understanding of the blending or marriage between heart, like a heart and mind mentality, like what was the intent versus, I guess, rights and privilege. And so I think this wasn't Dr. King, but
and also
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say intent and then the impact, right? So you can have the best of intentions, but if the impact is racist or the impact is somebody is dead, then there should be the consequences should flow with the impact, right?
Yes.
So that's why I don't know. 2 years, I don't know. $1,000, I don't know, right? But what I do know is she was representing the police department.
Yeah.
And the police department, like we've said, has had trouble with this over the past, visible trouble, public national scale trouble, and global scale trouble over the past 6 years, right? I think Philando Castile was killed 6 years ago. And his police officer, I don't even know if he had to leave the police department. That system, the police system, specifically that system, needs to be investigated, and they need to figure out what's going on. I liked what you were saying. It made me think of implicit bias that we have against Black people in our country. And it's not just white people have implicit bias. Everybody has implicit bias against Black people in America. And so we need to take that into consideration, especially when people are police officers and we're policing to protect and serve everybody. We need to take that into consideration. So in her moment, what was it that caused Kim Potter to respond that way, to be nervous? What was she going through? What was coming in the back of her mind in her police training that caused her to think now is a good time to get all these things out, right? And start acting this way. And we need to investigate all of that. We need to investigate every step of the way, from the day she was hired to the day that she was convicted of this.
You mentioned Breonna Taylor. Yeah, you mentioned Breonna Taylor. So that's a good example of how the original conflict between, I guess, citizens and Black and brown communities and police doesn't start from an individual perspective. Like in that case, no knock warrants. There's a history, not just of Black people, but people being killed, albeit accidentally even, because of the recklessness of what no-knock warrants are even in place for. And those it's taken dead people to have any kind of change with that. And so, like when that happens, typically, not all the time, but I know people know the names of the main officer. I think they killed Breonna Taylor. But in that sense, I would literally blame the system. Like, stop putting innocent people and officers in that chaotic scenario where people are just dying. And then it just happened recently. I think his last name was Locke. I forget who it was. You might know. But everyone's been screaming from the rooftop about Breonna Taylor. But when things still don't change with this, I know little things have been changed in certain different cities, but collectively, like overall, when those same scenarios are allowed to keep happening because of it was an accident or there wasn't intent, or like that guy with Breonna Taylor still running free, from what I'm pretty sure. It happens again. Someone else is dead, and not just black and brown people, innocent people. White people are being killed in these scenarios. So it's in this case a system of policing thing, and I just think that if humanity and the dignity of people with even something like, especially with something like policing was made more of a priority, like actually what does protect and serve mean, we would not be having these same conversations so often. And again, we're not asking for perfection, but are you familiar much with activist Stokely Carmichael?
A little bit.
From the 60s. So, I mean, he has a really super powerful quote. Stokely Carmichael, he's an activist in the 60s. Not coined, but he I think popularized the phrase Black Power, from what I understand, and was the leader of the what was it? I can remember the letters SNCC.
Student Nonviolent.
Yeah, Students Nonviolent Committee. Committee.
Yeah, SNCC. SNCC is the nickname. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Coordinating Committee, and specifically he was similar to the bus boycotts, did sit-ins at restaurants where Black people would refuse service based on skin color. Anyway, he has many poignant quotes out there, but one of them that I've come across a lot is about lynching, and his point is, if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If he has the right to do so, that's my problem. And to me, that is powerful and applicable to what we're talking about, because that shows, I think, the danger of focusing so much on someone's intent and heart when someone is killed inside power structures. You see what I mean? Like focusing on,
absolutely.
He's specifically talking about lynching, but he's focusing on, like, imagine, which has happened, if we just focus on, that's just one white person, or they didn't mean to, or they weren't overtly racist. It's like, well, that's great. That doesn't matter. Like, I don't personally care because someone's dead. Like anyone that's been, it's grieved doesn't need to hear that. And so to me, that is very, and that quote he ties into capitalism and finances and stuff, which we don't have time to unpack, but the powerfulness of that quote to me sticks out as we're talking about this, because I think there needs to be a conversation on what it looks like to talk about intent, as well as, legislation, laws, bills.
Yes, laws,
the system. And I think it is can be disingenuous, but also at the expense of the marginalized to not have those conversations.
Yeah. That's very well said. I also appreciate how you brought up Stokely Carmichael and SNCC. There's so much I can say, but I would like non-violent protests, I think, was such a topic over the past year. I'd love to dig into that. But what you said about going after systems, evaluating systems, we talk about systemic racism because racism is a part of our culture. It's a part of our history. It's a part of every system that we have, right? And I think we made a pretty good case for seeing it in the Minneapolis police department. I mean, we've just talked about three murders, three dead people at the hands of the police. And that's just over the past 6 years. That's only three, right? And they're pretty big cases. So they have a problem there. So, and it's a systemic problem. So I think who really should be on trial, yes, the individual police officers should be on trial and should have been held accountable.
Yeah.
But I think the police force also needs to be examined on trial. The government also needs to be examined on trial. And what I really like, Nelson Mandela, South Africa, fought for justice. Like, we know his name. Mm-hmm. He was the president. He had, in his autobiography, A Long Walk to Freedom, I read it a couple years ago, he talked about how they decided to attack the system of apartheid and to go after that rather than going after individuals, right?
Yeah.
You can still go after individuals, but the bigger thing is we need to examine the system that set it up so that there are these people with power and they come after these people, Black people, oppressed people, impoverished people, the people that are held down, they come after them. And then in these situations, these people die, right? And the people with power get away with it or walk away from it. And it's a system that puts these people in the same place together. We need to examine that system. I'm not saying tear down the system, burn it down, but we need to examine it. Maybe we need to burn it down. We need to start with examining it first, you know?
Yes.
So
I have a personal example.
Put the system on trial is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Personal example that kind of just thought of. So I grew up playing ice hockey, and like many sports, but I say ice hockey ice hockey has a different, racism exists in all sports, always has, but with hockey, super, very, very white sport. Loved it. Loved growing up playing ice hockey. Talk about that another time. But
was this in Virginia Beach? Played ice hockey?
Oh yeah. People listening that know me, that was who I was. Anyway, we can unpack that identity struggle another time. But grew up playing ice hockey.
Beach.
Yeah, very, very, very white sport, as it still is. But something stuck out to me as I was kind of thinking about these things. Every once in a while, we'd play a team, and there would be a Black player, and so this is something that I just became conditioned to, and I was just used to it happening. I experienced my own. I had my own experiences with racial slurs as an Asian player. So there's also not Asian players. Very white sport.
Yeah.
But when there was Black players, it was different. I knew that the N-word was going to be just thrown at this player the whole time, and I didn't really think about it. It was just completely normal. And
what age were you?
All ages. Well, not like super, super, super young, but high school age, middle school age for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
N-word, yes, kids. N-word's gonna be thrown out there, and that's just how it was. And I remember this happened a bunch of times, but even one specific time it got really bad. And players on my own team were saying the N-word, calling this guy the N-word, and the ref kind of stopped the game and gave, it's his sportsman-like warnings to both benches and the coaches, and saying like, enough of, watch your language, and enough of these. I think he might have said, stop with the racial slurs. And so if I stop right there, it sounds like, oh great, that guy spoke up and had everyone's back. And I think he was doing the best he could, but he said that, and then our side was kind of just laughing about it a little bit. And then I remember the Black player said something back like right away, just because obviously pent it up and angry. And the ref quickly said, and that goes for both sides. And I remember that kind of sticking out to me, because I'm like, sure, it does. Like you're not saying he shouldn't be allowed to do that either. I don't know what he would say. There's not an equivalent. But to me, that was indicative of a power structure of like, okay, but now you just made everyone on an equal playing field, and it's not an equal playing field. There's power structures at play, and we're so far down the road of privilege and comfort that it would be absurd to think that hearing the N-word should demand that those players be kicked out immediately or suspended. stuff like that. Like that would have been absolutely crazy to do. And so that sticks out to me because I think that is a scenario we find ourselves in often, even now. We run to, what's the intent? Let's slow down. A little too quick on this, whether it's, I don't want to pick on cancel culture, but a little too quick on this swift action. You know, let's unpack, make sure there wasn't ill intent or, let's unpack this and give benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise, which, you know, can just end up being super problematic. So anyway, that kind of stuck out to me because if it was flip-flopped, again, I'm not sure what the complete flip-flop would be. There wouldn't have been a 50-50 warning of both sides, right? I think that there's a convenience to when we take swift action, and that, like you're saying, we need to be willing to unpack on these journeys to understanding what is. I say journey, not that I think we're ever going to arrive at perfect answers, but journey as we continue to learn. What's just even behind something like a racial slur. Thoughts on that? That makes sense?
Yeah. No, that's a good picture of a system. Like what led to those boys using those words, thinking it was okay. Right. It was a culture. It was a system. It's everywhere. And they are still kids. Like it's high school. You're still so young. You didn't come by that on your own, right? So
it kind of usurps. It usurps like sports. Does that make sense? Like I enjoy some good trash talking in sports. Like when I see that happening and whatnot, but it's like no bullying is good like in schools. But I think what's behind something like a racial slur is the audacity or the feeling that you have the right to, that you are above somebody. We're kind of bringing it full circle with racism, right? I remember being in, like kids do in grade school, like being in arguments or like making jokes towards each other or I can't think of an example of saying stuff to each other and how quickly it can be ended by somebody saying, okay, Jackie Chan, to me. And hearing stuff like that, and that it cuts, it hurts, it hits different. It's like, oh man, that wasn't the same. That's not the same as what the kind of argument we were just having a minute ago, but I don't know what to do with that. I just know that I didn't have anything else to say. It shows that kids understand the power of racism. They understand power dynamics in society. They understand the culture that we come from. Like they understand all these things. They're not oblivious to it. And they picked it up and they know how to use it, right? They know how to weaponize that. So, You played hockey in high school. That's wild. Didn't know that about you. Right. Well, it was like you said, it was Virginia Beach, so it wasn't like for high school, but it was high school age. So I was,
high school age hockey.
The equivalent to like AAU.
So you were playing basketball and you were playing hockey. You had these two things going on. It's like
not simultaneously. Long story. We'll unpack that.
It'd be difficult to have a hoop on the ice and skates on the basketball court.
That would be. So we just took our 6-year-old ice skating last weekend, and so it's like a public ice skating place, and they love it. And then, but the majority of the music was hip hop they're playing there. So I was like, this is like, why wasn't this what we listened to when I warmed up playing hockey? I was like, this is like,
were you Radford?
Beautiful marriage between two things I love. Roanoke, so Southwest Virginia still.
Yeah, Roanoke. Okay. Yeah. Hip hop playing. Oh, that's funny.
All right, let's take one more quick break. Come back with a little more lighthearted topic. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please make sure to follow us on social media. You can follow the hashtag RaciallySpeakingPod, as well as the accounts DMFipsy and Walker.JohnMark on Instagram and Twitter for more helpful content. Now, back to the conversation. All right, John Mark, did you end up watching the Super Bowl?
I did.
Sorry about your Bengals, man.
Yeah, it's okay. They were in it. I was happy to see him play. So, yeah, well, hopefully they'll get in it again soon.
Yeah. Somehow I ended up
not
watching the whole
surprised by
game.
the outcome. Did you? I didn't. I stopped watching it because I was like, I like to get up to go to the gym in the morning. And the Bengals are like my family team. They're not really like the team that I would want to be in the Super Bowl. So I was like, I'm going to do the dishes. And my siblings were texting me updates of what was going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did watch it.
They'll be back, I'd assume. Somehow I ended up watching it just because it was a good game.
Yeah.
Right.
They made it here. So I think the team will continue to be good. So we'll see what happens. But
more importantly, we're here to talk about the halftime show of the Super Bowl. We're a little late to this party. I know it was a few weeks ago now.
The main event.
But the main event.
But here's the deal. Here's the deal with how our society works. Like, so fast. Like, we can slow down. We can talk about things that happened a month or two ago. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Give us.
Yeah, we're not that late.
Bail us out. Thanks, John Mark.
Yeah. So the halftime show. What did you think about it?
I loved it. Who
was it? It was Dre,
Mary J. Blige,
Eminem, Snoop Dogg, Mary J. Blige, Upside Down 50 Cent.
Upside Down 50 Cent.
Yeah, Upside Down 50 Cent.
And Kendrick
Lamar.
Yeah.
And Anderson .Paak. Did you know Anderson .Paak?
Not really,
Sonic?
no.
He's half of Silk Sonic. Yeah. I mean, he's up and coming. He was in Trolls 2. Is how I found him. He's got some good songs on that soundtrack with Justin Timberlake. But so he's up and coming. He was on the drums when Eminem was rapping and when Dr. Dre was doing the tribute to Tupac.
I saw a lot of memes about him.
Yeah, Anderson .Paak was on the.
I've heard his name. I didn't know who it was.
And I didn't even notice that until I watched it like the second time, and then I've since watched it like a third time. And
he was so happy.
I loved it that much, but yeah, just to be on the drums with Eminem.
He was vibing.
Yeah,
but I loved it. I'm not going to claim to know all of the my first and other breakdowns much more informative than mine. I just enjoyed listening to it. I loved it. Seemed like they were pretty unapologetically able to be themselves and represent the culture for the most part. It sounds like they had to censor a few things that I know some people weren't happy about. I think that it was overall fine. They
censored so many things, though.
Okay, right.
They censored so many words in their songs. But I know what you're saying. Like that, there were some things that it was rumored that there was some censorship. I'm not sure that all those rumors were true. Like it was rumored that Snoop wasn't supposed to wear colors on stage or a bandana, but his whole outfit was one. So
because I saw
they
that.
knew what he was going to wear.
Right, because I saw that and I was like, they can censor. I mean, if they censor stuff, obviously, maybe I wish it didn't happen, but I was more, in this case, focused on what they didn't censor. So, Snoop, his outfit. And I loved it. It was an awesome, I think, compilation of just, like, throwing it back to song. Like, I thought in a good way, songs that everyone knew for the most part, but then also did some really cool cultural things, like what Kendrick did. I wish there was more Kendrick, for sure.
Oh, man. What Kendrick did. Yeah, he was amazing.
Was
We Gonna
phenomenal.
Be All Right. I love that song.
Yes.
I love that song. I love the choreography of that song.
Yeah, and he's not even known for that.
Yeah, it was just great. It was just great. I mean, Kendrick was probably the one I was most excited about.
For sure.
I love Dre. Dre is, I don't know. He's like is he who they call the Godfather of rap? I don't know. I don't know if that's him. But so back from NWA days, he's been making stuff change. Right. He changed the whole scene.
He's very cultural.
From in his 20s.
Yeah. Like I just found this out recently. He's like the cult.
Go ahead.
It's amazing almost how influential he is culturally to me, because he doesn't have, as far as like the big names, he doesn't have that much well-known music like of his own. I know he collaborates a lot. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have like that many iconic albums per se.
No.
Essentially, everyone just knows him and his like producing and stuff like that. So anyway, I think that's interesting. It was cool to see him out there. I don't know if he's actually mixing stuff on the fly in that halftime show, but that looked cool.
It did look cool. Yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't be surprised if he was. I also wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't. I mean, I loved it. So Kendrick, when he came out, he had these boxes and it said Dre Day, right? So just celebrating Dr. Dre and the influence he's had on the music industry.
Yeah.
And that he brought us Eminem, he brought us Kendrick, Snoop. He brought us, I don't know what his connection is with Mary J. Blige. He brought us 50 Cent. But at 50, he was funny. That thing, I was like, okay, kids, like, close your eyes. I don't know about this. That made me a little uncomfortable. John Mark from like 15 years ago would have enjoyed that better. But now I'm just like, we could be a little bit more wholesome. Is wholesome what I'm looking for? But guilty pleasure. I love Eminem. I'm a big Eminem fan. And when he came out on stage, I was just like having the time of my life.
I love that he played.
He knelt. Right.
Yeah. Go ahead. I love that he played "Lose Yourself."
I was just gonna say, "Lose Yourself." Yeah, he knelt, and I didn't even notice him kneeling like in a football game. Yeah. People are like, "Oh, that's Colin Kaepernick, like he was kneeling for that." It was during a Tupac tribute, so I don't know why he knelt. I don't know if it was to take attention off himself, but love the Tupac tribute too. So for sure, it was good.
I love that he played "Lose Yourself," and I was worried that they might try and do something like that people wouldn't. Like his newer stuff just isn't well known. I know he's been putting new albums out, but it was just for this. I was like, you got to go with nostalgia, and I like that they did that because he does have a couple newer albums out that like aren't. I mean, they're fine, but aren't the ones that everyone would know at the Super Bowl by any means.
Yeah,
I think big picture. I know we kind of, by we I mean me, come at the NFL a little bit. I think it was better than the alternative. Like, I like that they elevated black culture, which 70-ish% of the league are black players. And large audience for sure. That they did that. Like, the alternative to not do that would have been insensitive, especially right there in LA. Tupac's out of LA and all of them. Yep. I guess all of them. I don't know if Mary J. Blige is from LA.
Eminem's not.
I
mean, Eminem obviously is not. He's from the Midwest.
Right. Kendrick is.
So, where's Dre. Kendrick? I think he's from out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kendrick, anyway, Dre, I thought that
Snoop,
was
for sure.
That was really cool. It was much better than like when it wasn't it like in Atlanta and they had I think Maroon 5 do the halftime show and it's just what a giant miss. It might not have been Maroon 5 that year, but I remember in Atlanta it was a big miss.
I do remember Maroon 5. Yeah, I remember Maroon 5. It's funny, since the halftime show, I haven't seen where this is said, but I've heard rumors of people saying that it was racist. And I'm just like, where, how, what? So I'm just like, I want to know.
Interesting.
I want to know what they thought, why they think that it was racist. But so I heard that. I mean, I'm like, they had Eminem on stage, right? So they got their white friend.
Oh, that's the angle that people are saying?
I don't know. Okay. I do not know where that's coming from, how they see that. I'm curious.
Yeah.
But I did hear that.
Big picture, I think because it's the NFL, it was also at the same time, even though the alternative to not have this representation at the halftime show would have not been good either. So it's kind of a lose-lose and no fault to anybody except the NFL themselves. But I feel like it can also easily come off as performative, and maybe that's where some of that's coming from. Mm-hmm. Because you can ask my wife. I was caught off guard. Like, I don't watch the NFL during the season, and I audibly started laughing when I saw the end racism, or it takes all of us in the end zones. Did you see that? It's end racism written in the end zones, or like. It takes all of us together, and I audibly laughed. It wasn't. I don't know. It just hit me in such a funny way with everything they're going through, and just how they continue to perpetuate racism in their organization. And it just I was like, wow, that is an amazingly performative slogan written on the field. And I didn't even know that it had been on there. I think it's been in the end zones all year, not just for the Super Bowl, which maybe made it a little bit better, but I just thought I really started cracking up.
That's hilarious.
It was just completely caught off guard.
I would have laughed too. Yeah, I would have laughed too. We really do need to do a full episode on the NFL.
Yeah.
And racism in the NFL. And I even think addressing the history of how black bodies were used to entertain people at the expense of those black bodies.
Yes.
So but the halftime show, I loved it leading up to it. I had a playlist on Spotify with all of like the best of their songs just playing. After the show. I've watched it 3 times. It was, I mean, it hit the spot for me. Now I feel like I'm going to be irrelevant because now I don't know if I'll know the artists who come up next. I feel like this was like my childhood with Eminem and then my adulthood with Kendrick. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm relevant anymore at this moment.
I'm like you. I thought it was great. If you're listening to us and you want our opinions, for me, I would say not to confuse it with, or not equating it with the NFL's commitment to ending racism, even though it's written on the end zones. It was a great entertainment for the fans and the players. Yeah, but they are a mess.
I mean, it was awesome. Rap was center stage for the first time.
They're a mess. They have so much stuff to do, which we'll have to talk about that down the road.
They do, yeah. Well, I have to do a research paper for that episode, though.
Yeah, overall, thought it was great. Oh my gosh, yeah. Let's ending on that note. I knew a friend I've just met and gotten to know. Shout out to John Kabongo. Check his stuff out on Spotify. He's a rapper. Hip hop artist locally to where I am at right now. He is currently doing some graduate work in the English department at the university level, and blew my mind of conversation I had with him recently, and we're gonna get him on here eventually. But
that's awesome.
He's writing about Kendrick, hip hop, and literature, and the stuff he was saying as he was unpacking some of where Kendrick coming from with his lyrics and stuff was just unbelievable. So shout out.
Really?
John Kabongo, check his stuff out on Spotify. Really good dude. We're going to have him on here eventually. That's already in the works. Anyway, man, this was good, John Mark, as always.
That was good.
We unpacked a lot. Enjoyed this. Listeners, thank you for making it all the way to the end. Go ahead and give your minds a rest to get the kneecaps off till next time. Thank you so much for listening. As always, this podcast was created to elevate BIPOC voices and to invite anyone else to listen and learn and grow with us. The music you're listening to was produced and written and created by the great Dylan Dent, and our artwork was created by the also great Ashley Bush.
The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go. Now I lay me down to sleep, I'm better with the valley. Now I lay me down to sleep, I'm better with the valley. Now I lay me down to sleep, I'm better with the valley. Now I lay me down to sleep, I'm better with the valley. Some days you know I lie better than others. Others I like to lie under the covers.